guy in the NBA should ever wear 23. I've been working on that shot my whole life, and for that one to go in, that was liberating right there, man.
And I'm not shoving it aside, like it don't mean anything. I know it's important. I do. I honestly do. But we talking about
23 Shots of JD podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to the 23 Shots of JD's podcast new series, 30 and 10, where we essentially break down all 30 teams in the NBA just 10 days before the season starts. So on the podcast today, I got Craig from Rasball.com. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi Jordan, pleased to be here. Just riding a bit of a high over here in England at the moment. We just retained the Ryder Cup in golf. NBA pre-season is now... Yeah, definitely. NBA pre-season is now fully underway, so really excited to get the basketball season going.
Cool, that's perfect. And just sort of for my listeners to hear, just to know a bit about your background, what do you sort of do on Rasball.com?
Well, over at Rasball, we're primarily a fantasy sports site, and we cover all the major American sports, if you like, so basketball, baseball, American football, and hockey. We have sort of 4 sub-teams, if you like, where, each individual sport has its own team. We have premium tools where we have, DFS lineups that are created. We've got, daily sort of insight into how to improve your fantasy teams. Different people cover different areas. I mean, me myself, I tend to cover the college hoop side, the European hoop side, and the NBA draft. My primary interest within basketball is more the player development side rather than necessarily just the NBA. So plenty going on over there. If you haven't checked it out before, it's a very fun site. We're an independent site, although quite large. We get to do what we want when we want, which was kind of the appeal several years ago about joining them. So if you haven't checked us out before, definitely worth checking us out.
Cool, yeah, I actually checked out your website when we first sort of linked up, and definitely a great website to go to. I like sort of the blog articles where they're nice and concise, so really straight to the point and sort of gets, the message forward quite easily. Just sort of as well, how long have you sort of been into basketball? Obviously, I'm guessing you've probably been based in the UK most of your life, so is basketball a big thing in the UK, or is it growing? How would you sort of say the scene in regards to, the UK being more receptive to, basketball and stuff like that is?
Well, I've probably followed basketball since about 1991, I guess, about the age of 9. We used to have like a highlights program, if you like, on Saturday mornings for an hour long, and that was kind of, just being passionate about sport at that age. That was kind of how I got into it. I then started to play quite a bit. I spent quite a bit of time as a child living in Brisbane, so the access to playing was a lot greater than it was here. Basketball was kind of a non-entity as a participation sport here. Now it's one of the fastest growing participation sports here, but we don't really have what you would consider much of a competitive domestic league that rivals anything close to that of, say, France or Lithuania or the Adriatic League or Spain. So the participation element of it is growing, but in terms of its actual sort of popularity, you wouldn't meet an average person down the street and they wouldn't know who Karl Anthony Towns was, for example. But you'd see plenty of Minnesota. But they'll happily wear a Minnesota Timberwolves hat, but they wouldn't know anything about them. So, it is growing. The biggest sort of stalwart that we have and the biggest thing in our favour was Luol Deng, really. He's been a sort of a revelation to British basketball. I know that he's pretty much hated in LA with how much he cost them with barely playing. But he's invested so much into the sport in this country. He was happy to really lead the national team and really try and make the sport grow. He invests a ton of money, and primarily because of him, that's why the participation is, on the up here.
That's good to hear. I've always wondered about that because I feel like, basketball is very much an untapped market within the UK. I feel like being based in Australia, there's definitely been a massive growth period, especially on the backs of, the new age, I guess, Australian basketball players in Ben Simmons, Dante Exum, Thon Maker and the likes. And I feel like definitely if the UK could sort of grow that type of development, like you said, sort of player development, domestically, I think it could work out the UK to grow a lot more, because they already send the NBA games to the UK, so it seems that they're receptive to watching basketball and they like the sport itself and I guess the league. But like you said, domestically and building it internally within the UK is probably something that UK basketball might need to work on.
They're definitely trying. I mean, like you said, we have the one game a year here that's held in London. The difficulty is it's held in an arena which only holds about 18,000. So the ticket prices they go for about £250 if you're lucky enough to even get one. So it's not really achievable to go unless you've got that kind of money to spend. We do have it on the telly, but it's going to be losing its rights on the telly soon on one of our sports channels. So that's a downer. But it is growing, but it's still quite a ways away from catching up, with the likes of France or Spain.
Yeah, that's quite interesting to say, because it's weird that everywhere else in Europe, basketball is one of the more premier sports, but it seems that UK seems to be lagging a bit behind. But I think we'll probably just drop straight into it. So the teams that we're looking at today is the Charlotte Hornets, the Sacramento Kings, and the Phoenix Suns. And just starting with the Charlotte Hornets, one of those interesting teams in the West. They're sort of a French playoff team. It's hard to really judge a team like that. They're sort of one of those teams that I like to call just in that no man's land area. Like, they're not fighting for a championship at all, but they're not so bad that they're really tanking or fighting for the lottery. So, are you much of a Hornets fan, Craig?
No, I don't actually support any one particular team of the NBA. I just have a love for the game itself. I'm a big Baylor fan in college hoops. But in terms of the NBA, I spend time watching all the teams, primarily tracking a lot of the younger guys and how they're developing. Charlotte Hornets are certainly one of the teams that I'll be spending a lot of time watching this year. Like you said, they've been in no man's land, but a great deal has sort of changed there over the summer. They had to try something, and moving on from Steve Clifford is a big plus, if you ask me. You've got James Borrego coming in, who's now trying to push this 12-second shot clock, and in the 3 games they've played in pre-season, it's definitely it's definitely action and not words. So that's definitely interesting, especially as it's kind of forced the ball movement to improve. They looked a lot more stagnant last year than what they kind of should have done. So it's definitely an interesting thing to see this year. I mean, are they going to get more wins? I think that they probably will get a couple more wins, but I still think they're in that no man's land. And the difficulty comes is with the salaries, really. They've got so much money tied into guys like Nick Batum and Biyombo and Marvin Williams for the next couple of seasons that they're going to have to try and get really creative if they will push forward. But, changing the coach to James Borrego, a guy that I'm very, very much a fan of, upping the tempo, the emergence of guys like Malik Monk and, Miles Bridges is going to be huge in their development, and probably addition by subtraction by losing Dwight Howard as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I did want to mention that. How do you think the whole Dwight Howard experiment sort of panned out? Because before he came there, he was already on his, I think it would have been his 4th team basically, and I think they were trying to get a bit of pick and roll action with Kemba Walker obviously as the primary ball handler, and then try and play that 1-2 game. But yeah, it just didn't seem to pan out for the Hornets just last year. It was just a bit interesting to sort of see how they didn't really I guess they didn't even have any expectations, like we both said. They're in no man's land, but you sort of expected a bit more, especially, considering that they were a French playoff team the year before that. So, definitely interesting. Especially, one thing I wanted to point out, and you might probably be one of the better people to talk upon this, is sort of Malik Monk's progression, because I've been a big proponent of Malik Monk in the podcast in the past. When he first got drafted, I said this guy's going to be a stud. New York Knicks completely, messed up. They should have got Malik Monk. For all that scoring shooting guard, he basically lit up the SEC in college. killed it from Kentucky, had like a 40-point game, so really had everything: athleticism, could shoot the three, and just to me personally, with the Hornets, he didn't really get much game time. I don't know if that was like a strategic move, maybe he was injured, or maybe just coaching differences. I'm not entirely sure. But how do you think Malik Monk was last year in his rookie season, and how do you think he's going to progress in the upcoming season?
I'm so glad you brought this up. I'm considered the Malik Monk lover over at Razzball, if you like.
Okay, yeah, that's good to
hear. Huge fan of his. I mean, literally, it's difficult to find a post this pre-season without me finding, or one of our podcasts without, there being plenty of Monk talk. I'm with you. I'm a huge fan of the skill set. Like you said, he played in that really exciting Kentucky team with De'Aaron Fox and Bam Adebayo. And, he primarily played off the ball there, which kind of undersold his ability as a ball handler. Kentucky played with a very fast system, but they wanted to put the ball in De'Aaron Fox's hands because of the speed that Fox has to push the pace. But like you said, he's very, very athletic, and if you look at his field goal percentage last year, it really undersold how good of a shooter he really is. Where I think the problems lie last year was, one, Steve Clifford. To get the best out of Monk, you've got to move the ball. Clifford, like you said, Dwight Howard came in. They tried the pick and roll action, made the offense a bit predictable. And two, I think some of the expectations from some people on Malik Monk were a little bit too high too soon, because you're talking about a 6'3" guard who wasn't physically very strong, and what we really needed to see, and what he really needed, was time to build the confidence to take contact against more physically stronger players. And at the back end of the season, we really saw that when they started to rest Kemba and some of the other guys. He was getting 24 minutes a game. I think the final month of the season, he averaged 20 points a game, 4 assists, 4 rebounds. Shooting percentage at that time was like 48%. And that's kind of what I'm not expecting that level just yet. But he really showed, that he was now in a position where he was willing to attack the lane and use that athleticism against bigger, stronger people. So I think some of the expectations were just too high too quickly for a guy that's so small, if you like. So there was a bit of physical maturation going on there, and I still think that is a bit of the case. But with the Hornets looking to play this 12-second shot clock, which they have been doing quite successfully in the preseason, it's really going to benefit into Monk's hands and really show what he can do as a ball handler and a distributor, not just as a shooter.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely, before he got drafted, there was a lot of sort of talks that he could be sort of in that Devin Booker mode, like you mentioned, that he didn't really get the opportunity to be much of a ball handler at Kentucky. De'Aaron Fox was very much the primary distributor. But much like Devin Booker when he played, in the Karl-Anthony Towns Kentucky team, he didn't really get much action in regards to handling the ball individually, playing that pick and roll action. So I honestly, like yourself, I do have a big rap on Malik Monk, and I don't think he's going to be as good as Devin Booker, but I think a similar progression in the way that the Charlotte Hornets might go, especially unknown what Kemba Walker's going to be doing. So yeah, I definitely see Malik Monk taking that big step forward in his progression. But as you mentioned as well, the 12-second shot clock sort of theory that the new coach Borreg is doing, San Antonio Spurs assistant. Do you think he's going to get as much success at the Hornets as quickly as other sort of Spurs assistants had, like Mike Budenholzer or the coach from Philadelphia? God, it's escaping my mind now. But you know what I mean? Like, do you think he can bring what Pop? Yeah, do you think he could bring what Pop taught him into the Hornet system?
I think so. I think the difficulty that he's going to have is the personnel that he has there. I think it's still a team that's going to find its identity, especially on the defensive end. And I think some of the trying to push the pace is to try and outshoot their opponents, if you like, as opposed to, really being, other teams being able to exploit them defensively. I mean, I'm a big fan of Malik Monk, but from a defensive standpoint, he's not quite there yet. They're trying to move away from Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, and I think he's got a player option next year, which I think he'd be a fool not to take. But I think they're trying to move away from Michael Kidd-Gilchrist and Marvin Williams' style of play. But there are you look at that lineup and you think that there are certain guys that will be playing minutes that can be exploited defensively. If they roll Willie Hernan-Gomez in the front court, that's a guy that's going to get abused and bullied up there. Great offensive per minute contributions, but as a real life defender, not so much, which is why you're probably going to see, a lot of Cody Zeller as well. So I think there's an element of finding identity. I mean, with Monk as well, I think you've got to temper expectations for the first two or 3 months, maybe. I think they're still trying to figure out whether he's going to be, a potential more of a ball handler or whether he's going to play the shooting guard. I mean, Nick Batum's now moving to the 3, so that's going to open up some time for the 2. But I think Jeremy Lamb, with his length and, he's a superior defender to Monk at this point, is probably going to get the bulk of the minutes there. So I think we're going to see a lot of Monk playing a, backup point, backup shooting guard. And I think, with Monk, with, maybe Willie Hernan-Gomez, Miles Bridges as well, I think they're really trying to find out what they've got in these guys and, what their real role is going to be for the team in the future.
Yeah, most definitely. You did touch on Miles Bridges before. He's definitely had some really great performances in pre-season. I think a couple of 20-point games and some monster put-back dunks. And I think he sort of falls victim to a lot of these college stars that go a second year in college. They sort of get more criticized, and in regards to his stats, he didn't necessarily improve. I think he did, in some stats, really not decline, but got less than what he did in his freshman season. But I think Miles Bridges is one of those players. I don't think he's going to fail in the NBA. He's got that type of motor, that type of sort of just passion for the sport that sort of a lot of players really lack in the NBA, especially when they get their big paycheck. So I think Miles Bridges is definitely someone that the Hornets want to develop along with Hernan-Gomez and Monk. Another sort of change that they made in the offseason was obviously Mitch Kupchak coming in as GM. Do you think that's going to be a positive or negative effect? Is it going to have a positive or negative effect on the Hornets? Because obviously, Lakers fans probably don't look at him in the best light, especially with his last tenure or the end of his tenure at the Lakers. So, how do you think Mitch Kupchak's role is going to really influence the Hornets?
I don't think it's going to be overly positive, to be honest with you. Looking at what he did at the Lakers, I think that it's quite easy to be pessimistic, especially when you look at the situation that the Hornets are in terms of their cap space. There's not a lot to work with, and I don't know whether he's going to be able to be creative enough in order to really do what they need to do. I mean, whether Kemba stays or goes is going to be a real sort of like big point for them this season. And when that decision's kind of made, they're really going to have to try and get creative to find a clear path forwards, because even if Kemba doesn't re-sign and goes elsewhere in free agency, or if they don't trade him, they're still going to have a lot of bad contracts on the books, which it's not a situation like Sacramento or Atlanta or Brooklyn, which have a ton of cap space where they can get creative. So I'm not a big fan of the Kupchak signing or the hiring. Isn't for me. But again, sometimes just a fresh environment, a new set of tools, it can work wonders at times.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think just to sort of finish up on the Hornets, what do you think sort of Hornets fans or maybe just general NBA fans should expect from the team? I honestly think they're going to miss the playoffs, even though they have an all-star caliber point guard in Kemba Walker. I think what we touched on before, their sort of roster's not really adept to really competing even in the Eastern Conference alone. So, yeah, what do you think lies ahead for the Hornets this season?
Well, I've got them pegged down for 38 wins this season, which is a couple more than last year. I think they're one of those teams that have quite a high standard deviation on how their performance can go, and it's going to come down to that chemistry early. How are the players going to respond to this new up-tempo system? I mean, they kind of, you look at the roster and they've kind of got the depth to be able to play a lot of these guys. play the run system and play a lot of these guys 23, 24, 25 minutes and try and, out hustle and outwork teams, if you like. So I think there's the potential for wins there. But I think we're still looking at a bit of no man's land here. Malik Monk, I'm a massive fan. He's still not quite there yet. Miles Bridges, let's wait to see what his role's actually going to be. Is he a small forward? Is he a power forward? They've even experimented this pre-season playing him at the 5. But there is a bit of a logjam in that front court, which is quite difficult at this point to really, suss out who's going to get what minutes here and there. So there's a lot of identity. There's plenty of talent on the team, but there's a bit of an identity crisis still, especially seeing as, will Kemba get traded? Is he, is he going to sign, or is he just going to leave in free agency? So, there's a wide standard deviation of what could happen for this team.
Yeah, most definitely. And I guess talking about, teams trying to get younger and trying to get more youthful, the Sacramento Kings are definitely one of those teams in the NBA that are really going for that youthful route and going through, building through the draft. And obviously last year it was a clear thing that they were going to try and tank. They weren't really competing for anything. I think they wanted to play a lot of the young players, especially getting what they believe to be their future point guard, De'Aaron Fox, and on top of that, Bogdan Bogdanovic from the EuroLeague, who's had a very prolific career over there as a youngster, and obviously taking a bit of a smoking on Harry Giles. So, what do you think of the Kings last year and how they were able to utilize sort of De'Aaron Fox and the other new young players?
I think one of the surprises for me last year was the fact that the Sacramento Kings actually got to 27 wins.
Yeah.
It was a total mess last year from the start. It was a mess, and then it just got worse. The George Hill side, I understand the importance of veteran presence with so many young guys around, but they invested a high pick in De'Aaron Fox, and then they signed George Hill to a horrible contract. They had two guys that could run the floor in transition with Scal and Willie Cauley-Stein, and they bring in Zebo, as another veteran presence. But the first time it looks like the right noises are coming out was Marvin Bagley Jr., or Marvin Bagley III, the right call at the number 2 pick. Time will tell. But they drafted him at 2, and if you do that, you've got to play at a faster pace, and they're making the noise. Dave Yeager's come out and said, we're going to push the pace this year, really play to our strengths through De'Aaron Fox's pace. Marvin Bagley and Harry Giles are both tremendous athletes, run the floor very well, and you get the best out of them when they play in transition basketball. He said that he's going to play the young guns as well, so I think the days of, Costa Koufos and Zebo, how Costa Koufos is still in the league is absolutely beyond me. But we still have a little bit. But we still have a bit of the Kings being the Kings. I mean, I didn't quite understand the Bjelica signing. They got Wenyen Gabriel on a 2-way contract, which I kind of thought could do the same thing, just much, much cheaper, rather than commit to paying, $21 million over 3 years to Bjelica. So it's going to be another tricky season ahead, but I think that, at long last, it seems like they're making the right noises, trying to play to their strengths. I'm a big, big fan of Harry Giles. I think he's going to be brought along slowly, but he was really impressive in Summer League. This was a high school phenom, one of the, best high schoolers there was, before the injuries really, really derailed him. Never looked the same at Duke. Glad that he sat out last year. So it's a big, big season for him. But again, we've got that logjam in the front court. It's very difficult to predict how they're going to go minutes-wise, but I really hope that, Bagley and Harry Giles at least are given a chance to really show what they can do in a fast-tempo offense.
Yeah, exactly. And I like how you mentioned Harry Giles, because he's often sort of just a forgotten person in the draft. Obviously, with he had 2 torn ACLs throughout his high school career, so he was definitely forgotten. But like you said, he was a high school phenom. He was the number 1 ESPN 100 player in his class, and ironically enough, he was sort of compared to Chris Webber. He was sort of a do everything forward. He could get to the pinch post fade away and stuff like that, get into the post, rebound, athletic, and obviously just with his knee issues, he sort of derailed his start of his career. But yeah, like you said, he does look a bit more positive in summer league and a little bit in the preseason action and stuff like that. But what I do want to get to is the Marvin Bagley pick. I think sort of a safe pick in my opinion, especially he had a monster production year at Duke, and sort of what you're going to get from him. He's going to score, he's going to rebound, but I think that sort of X factor, that stardom, that superstar potential that a lot of people are looking for, especially in a number 2 pick, I don't think he has. And obviously looking at a lot of other people, they think that maybe they should have picked up a Luka Doncic or maybe go in a different direction, maybe Jaren Jackson, who knows. So yeah, how do you feel about Marvin Bagley getting picked at number 2?
I don't have that much issue with the pick, to be honest with you. I guess I'm on the other side of the coin, where I think you look at the guys, and you look at the skill sets, and I think Marvin Bagley is a guy that has the skill set to be all-star, a future all-star candidate. He is predominantly one-handed, which is a real issue. Was really found out in isolation play in summer league. He came out of Duke, where they transitioned to the zone defense, and it kind of made them all look a bit, weak on the defensive end outside of Wendell Carter Jr. and really seemed to hurt quite a few, Gary Trent Jr. and Trayvon Duval's draft stock. But I think there is an it factor there. Like you said, this is a guy that has the potential to be elite in points, elite in rebounds. I think he, off the top of my head, I think he might have set the freshman SEC or maybe even college freshman record for rebounds in a season. And you've got to remember that he was he forego his senior year in high school to sort of reclassify in order to enter the 2000 NBA draft and join Duke. So he is still only just turned 19 years old, still very, very young. I think the Kings is just a tough landing spot for anybody. But at least with them, making the noises that they're going to push the pace, that's going to play to Bagley's strengths. It would have been criminal had they not drafted Luka Doncic and then still played at the league's second worst pace, because Doncic does have that perimeter creative ability, that sort of the keys to the offense, if you like. There's still work to be done there for Marvin Bagley, but I didn't hate the pick. I'm a massive fan of Luka Doncic. But I didn't hate the pick. I do think there is a bit of an it factor there.
Yeah, exactly. I guess maybe, I think again he sort of falls victim to a lot of college players that they start off big, much like Trae Young and some others. So even DeAndre Ayton got a similar rap where it's just like they put up such great numbers at the beginning, and then people just sort of want to nitpick at the little things. And yeah, I think Marvin, just in my opinion, I don't think Marvin Bagley has, superstar, maybe all-star potential, but I think he sort of falls under that maybe DeMarcus Cousins route where he gets great stats, he's going to put up his numbers, but is he going to elevate his team? And who knows? Maybe you don't need him to elevate the team. Maybe you have people like De'Aaron Fox or other maybe veterans on the team that are going to sort of fill that void. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see Marvin Bagley. Definitely. If anyone's a betting man here, I think he's definitely a sort of a smoky, not really a smoky, but everyone has DeAndre Ayton as Rookie of the Year. But I think if you want to pick a point of difference type of person, I think Marvin Bagley is definitely gonna be putting up some points and he's gonna be putting up some rebounds as well. Some other notable.
Just to go back to Bagley. Just to go back to Bagley for 1 second, and a lot of the things that you tend to hear is, he's a poor defender. He didn't block many shots in college and stuff. Like I said, the sort of Duke system really kind of found him wanted in that department. But you watch him through summer league. You watch the game the other night in preseason game. That athletic ability, there is defensive naivety there. Don't get me wrong, but again, you expect that from a rookie, especially a one and done rookie like Marvin Bagley. But the athleticism is there for it to really play on the defensive end. In summer league, he really caused problems, altering shots, blocking shots, because of how high the kid can jump. So I think he is. I think a lot of people are quick to label. A lot of people had these same concerns with Jason Tatum last year, saying that he's again out of Duke, he's not a very good defender. The footwork's lacking, etc., etc. And, look what Boston have done with him. I think I'm kind of trying to say that, these are not finished products. A lot of it starts now with the development. You've got to remember in college, they have the Cara rule, so they're not like, they're not coached full time, if you like. So they get their 20 hours a week coaching as a player. And it really does make a difference, especially with the freshmen. So I think, it's easy to point the finger at Marvin Bagley because it wasn't an overwhelming summer league. There are deficiencies there, but you look at every player from the NBA draft this year, and every player has some kind of red flag in some way, shape, or form, I think.
Yeah, most definitely. I do agree. A lot of these rookies are not finished products, so we've got to see what it does. But Sacramento Kings' development compared to Boston Celtics development, that might be a sort of, where, the difference between Jason Tatum and Marvin Bagley's sort of career projections might lie. But just to note some other signings, Ben McLemore coming back to the Kings. Again, that's an interesting one. And obviously, you touched upon Bielitsa getting signed. And them signing Yogi Ferrell as well. I guess that's probably going to be their backup point guard for De'Aaron Fox. But just to sort of wrap up on the Kings, what do you think the expectations or how people should feel about the Kings? Again, don't think they're going to be looking for any playoff hopes, especially in the tough Western Conference. But I think they'll definitely be one of those teams that you want to watch. A league pass team where they got young, exciting players, as we mentioned from the top: Fox, Bagley, Giles, Bogdan. They're gonna play at a high pace. They're gonna be athletic, young, quick, fast. So yeah, definitely a team to look to. How do you feel about their sort of season progressions?
Well, I actually think I feel much better about the Kings now than what I did say this time a year ago. Again, like I said, they're making the right noises. They're playing to their strengths now. They're going to run the young guys out there, which is probably going to make it more fun to us, certainly for me, to watch. I don't think they've got any worse, but they're going to get less wins in my eyes. I've got them pegged down for 21, just because you look at the teams around them in the West down the bottom. The Mavericks have got better with Luka Doncic and DeAndre Jordan signing. You've got the Lakers, obviously, are going to get more wins. The Suns have made, significant strides forward, if you like. Obviously still question marks. But you've got to fancy them to increase their win total as well. So I don't think they've got any worse. And I think that another year's experience for a guy like De'Aaron Fox, and especially the confidence shown in him, Marvin Bagley coming in, a healthy Harry Giles, again, I think they're going to bring him along slowly. I think that, the future is bright. It's just a bit of a shame that they haven't got their first round pick next year. But that being said, just with how much stronger the West has got, I see them going from 27 to 21 wins through no real fault of their own.
Yeah, of course. Just like you said, the Mavericks, the Lakers are going to get better. Denver's probably going to be pushing for players. So a lot of teams within that non-playoff race last year is definitely going to be pushing forward, like you said. And I guess another team in the West that sort of, you could say, improved drastically, especially with their pick, is the Phoenix Suns. And last year, again, it was clear that they were going to, race for the tank, especially considering that the NBA changed its its lottery system. So, the Suns definitely going to try and take advantage of getting that number one pick. And last year, Devin Booker took a massive step. He took a massive step and sort of solidified himself as one of the next young up-and-coming superstars, I think, alongside his teammate Karl Anthony Towns. He's definitely one of those players to really look to. Exciting, young, shoot the three. He's really worked on his sort of Kobe-like fadeaway, so definitely doing well there. And Josh Jackson as well. I think he had a bit of a slow start, in my opinion, at the beginning of the year, but definitely picked it up towards the end of the year and definitely showed people that potential where, he had some player comps some websites have player comps to Kawhi Leonard. So Josh Jackson is definitely someone that you want to look to as well coming up this year. But and I think as well I should mention sort of the stagnancy of Dragan Bender. I think he was a top 5 pick a couple years ago, and people were expecting him to be a lot more than he is now. And hopefully, I don't like to see young guys not reach their potential. So I hope coming up to this summer and coming to the season that he can get a bit better as well. But you yourself, Craig, how did you find the Phoenix Suns last year?
I think the important thing for the Phoenix Suns last year was really seeing the potential that Josh Jackson has got. Like you said, he started off slow, but that's nothing new for Josh Jackson. At Kansas, he did exactly the same thing. He went in, another high school phenom, if you like, projected number 1 overall pick contender, and he started the season really slow at Kansas. Then picked it up second half of the season. Then, world beater might be a bit of an overstatement, but he certainly, looked like one of the best players in college basketball, certainly within his draft class, in the second half of the season going into the NCAA tournament. He had a slow summer league, but the preseason game the other night, seeing the chemistry between him and DeAndre Ayton, the improved ability to pass the ball, handle the ball. I'm a big fan of his abilities. He isn't a very good shooter just yet, horrific at the line as well. But what's going to be really interesting is they just seem to have this logjam at the wings. The other night we had TJ Warren, Josh Jackson started, TJ Warren came off the bench, but Trevor Ariza, who they've recently signed, that's a guy that's out injured who's going to be coming into the team. Is Devin Booker going to play the point guard? I kind of like what they've done. They've kind of shut this rebuilding window, if you like. They were aggressive in the draft by trading their pick and a future first to get Mikal Bridges. I'm not sure it's necessarily the right guy for them. For me, it's a limited upside guy. And again, someone else who complicates the wings, if you like. But, they got their much needed centre that they wanted in, their local boy, DeAndre Ayton. I'm a massive fan of Elie Kobu, the point guard out of Pau in France. Real maestro in the pick and roll, has a really excellent feel on the offensive end. They brought in DeAnthony Melton, probably the sort of polar opposite, if you like, through trade, to Elie Kobu, where he's much more of a 3-and-D guy, if you like. And so I like a lot of the things that they've done. I think it's just difficult. Again, the West has got so much better. You've just got to look at the fact of where are the wins going to come from? I mean, they got 21 wins last season, which by anyone's standards is poor. Is there going to be, how much of an improvement can they actually get? I mean, Ariza's a great signing. DeAndre Ayton's obviously a great get with the number 1 overall pick. Mikal Bridges is going to have some impact straight away. But I've got them for 34 wins. I think they can do enough to improve significantly. But I think they're still a bit away from being in that playoff contender list.
Yeah, most definitely. I did just want to ask you a question as well. Do you think there's all those sort of moments about Devin Booker wanting to be part of a championship contender, really fight and try and play for the playoffs? Do you think that definitely got into the psyche of the Phoenix Suns, front office, that they wanted to push forward because they know that Devin Booker's, I think a generational talent? And do you think they were sort of pressured by him, scared that he might leave or he might, sort of be disinterested in the franchise? Do you think they pushed hard to get, Trevor Ariza in free agency? They also got Ryan Anderson. So, do you think that sort of influenced a lot of their summer decisions?
Potentially, yes. But I don't think that was the be-all and end-all. I think ownership wanted to see a drastic improvement and didn't want a prolonged period of rebuild, if you like. I think they got the number 1 pick. They saw a window of opportunity to be able to improve quickly. Whether it's going to improve by enough is, it remains to be seen. I mean, the big question mark really in terms of them taking it to the next level is what happens at the point guard. Is Devin Booker going to play the 1? Are they going to push for trade? Is a guy like Kemba Walker, or and there's been some rumours of Tyus Jones in Minnesota, or maybe even one of the Toronto, excellent Toronto backups in Fred VanVleet or DeLon Wright. So there are question marks there, definitely at the point guard position. It's just difficult to see how it's going to materialise, really. They want the ball in Booker's hands, but are they kind of taking something away from the team by doing that? I kind of feel that they do. So it's going to be an interesting season nonetheless, and that point guard position is definitely going to be a key, I think, as to how many wins that they get. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Elie Kobu, and I think in time he has the ability to be a starting point guard in the league sooner rather than later. And I think his game will translate well because of the success that he has as a pick and roll maestro, or pick and pop as well. I think that could be the long-term goal, but it seems like they want to put wins on the board now, and in order to do that, they're going to have to either get creative with Booker playing the point or exploring the trade market. And who's your assets that you're going to trade? I mean, TJ Warren's probably the most likely to go, I would have thought. So there's still a lot of question marks there, but it's again another exciting team. A lot's changed there, but that West is tough, man. It's really tough.
Yeah, it's really tough, really, really tough. And I think I guess what's going to aid them in really taking that next step forward is definitely DeAndre Ayton, the number one pick in last draft. And he put on a monster performance in his preseason debut. He sort of showed that and told everyone, I'm here. I'm fighting for my Rookie of the Year campaign, but not only that, I'm taking the league by storm. And I think, as we sort of mentioned throughout the podcast, that there's a lot of college players that sort of get nitpicked at, and I definitely feel like he fell victim to that. And then on top of that, the whole Arizona scandal with Sean Miller and stuff like that with the NCAA, I think that definitely sort of culminated into this whole sort of weird sort of perception of DeAndre Ayton. But I think he's definitely going to be a stud player. I think most people, maybe including yourself, would think that defensively he might need to definitely improve. But how do you feel about DeAndre Ayton at the Phoenix Suns and sort of how he's going to pan out this year?
I think you're right. I think there are question marks in terms of the physical gifts are absolutely wonderful. It's NBA-ready physical gifts. I still think there's a lot of naivety on the defensive end and a lot of the fundamental side of things with the basketball. It's almost like there's a reliance too much on his physical gifts rather than basketball IQ. And that's kind of the only real big red flag that I have with DeAndre Ayton is the basketball IQ there to really push it to the next level. I'm confident that with Luka Doncic, although he doesn't have the physical gifts, if you like, that Ayton does, obviously he's a big boy that's going to create mismatch hell. But the potential's there. The potential's there for him to be a really outstanding player. No question about it. I think that it's going to be a little bit more of a learning curve than what some people think. I mean, it was really impressive the other night. Was it 30 points, 3 blocks, 10 rebounds, etc.? But again, it's pre-season against the Sacramento Kings, and pre-season against the Sacramento Kings playing in a new system with a lot of new personnel in an up-tempo style with 2 very young bigs, if you like, that he was up against. So I think we've got to kind of put some of the expectation a bit in check. I think in terms of making them better, he will do eventually. I think that it's a big ask to expect too much of him, making them that much of a better team immediately. Does that make sense?
Yeah, most definitely. I definitely hear what you're sort of talking about, that he does. He's not, obviously, all these rookies are not a polished product, but he definitely needs to get, have a bit of work on defensively. And I do agree that physically, especially in college, he dominated most of his, opposing centers. Used his, he has the big broad shoulders, so he definitely went at them physically. And I think fundamentally, because he started playing basketball at a very late age, I think maybe 15, 16. So realistically, he hasn't had that much time of development. And similarly enough, that's sort of how Joe Embiid started. He was very raw at Kansas, and then we sort of progression. So who knows? Maybe it could end up being sort of a Joel Embiid type journey for him, but. Definitely, I feel like he's going to be the favourite for the Rookie of the Year. One more question I sort of wanted to ask as well, you sort of being more into the college hoops. Did you think that the Mikal Bridges, Zhaire Smith trade was, the right one for the Phoenix Suns? Was it worth it? Or do you think they should have just kept Zhaire Smith, especially because there was a lot of hype, especially coming draft about his athleticism, his sort of toughness and stuff like that, and Bridges was sort of the polished product. How do you think those sort of 2 players compared?
Oh, I felt so sorry for Mikal Bridges. Philadelphia lad, mum works in the franchise, college at Villanova, really riding the high of winning a national championship, and he gets selected by his hometown, and then 20 minutes later is traded. I didn't like the move for either side. I thought Mikal Bridges could offer something immediately for the Philadelphia 76ers, especially in the playoffs where they need defensive stalwartness about them, if you like. I mean, obviously they got Bob Covington there, but I think Fultz will come through as a fantastic player, but he isn't a very good defender. Neither's JJ Redick. I think they needed that guy now. So if I was the 76ers in the position that they were in, I thought it was the right pick at the right time. And then, I guess it was hard for them to just pass up on that extra asset of that future first. And again, I didn't understand it necessarily from the Phoenix Suns' point of view. I thought waiting on Zaire Smith, I mean, like you said, the athleticism, it really is unreal. He's a highlight machine, if you like, waiting to happen. But the offensive game's really, really raw. I think that the defensive ceiling's very, very high. And that isn't to say that the offensive ceiling won't increase. We saw it with Kawhi Leonard having similar question marks and turning into an NBA superstar, if you like. But I thought that waiting on Zaire Smith, keeping that future first, was the right move for the Phoenix Suns. I mean, you've got to admire the aggression that they're trying to make something happen, and they wanted a guy that they felt could help the team obtain wins now. I get that. I just felt being a bit more patient was probably the right call for the Phoenix Suns. But yeah, poor Mikal Bridges. I mean, I felt for the kid.
Yeah, definitely. I was watching the draft live, and they had that whole interview. His mum was there. His mum was wearing the Phoenix Suns cap, saying
his mum's hot, isn't she, as well?
Yeah, she's not bad. She's definitely not bad. And it was sort of just like the perfect draft story, and then next minute you just see him get shipped to Suns. I very much agree with your sort of opinion that Bridges would have fit with Philadelphia a lot more. Again, ready type player. People said that he should have got drafted by the Cavs if the Cavs are going to still play for LeBron James, hoping that he's going to sign with them. But yeah, definitely, I think Bridges is more of a ready talent. He's going to produce. I think he might be a bit overhyped because he sort of had the sensation he was in Villanova. But I think he's a really solid player.
Look at the players he had around him at Villanova, though. I think that you've got to remember this was a 3-year college player, not a freshman, and he had Jalen Brunson.
As well.
Yeah, he had Jalen Brunson, Amari Spellman, Dante DiVincenzo. He had a really good team around him that really suited his style of play. So I think for me, he's a guy that has limited, he hasn't got that superstar upside, if that makes sense, but he was exactly what Philadelphia needed. So I understood, Brett Brown, he was the interim GM at the time, wasn't he? And he was like, he was battling with himself, wasn't he? Does he as a GM take the offer where he gets the future asset, or, as a coach, I think Mikal Bridges was the guy he wanted. I think they should have stuck with their guns, but time will tell. Like we sort of alluded to earlier, these aren't finished products. This is just the beginning. They bring a skill set to the table. It's how those strengths and weaknesses are now developed and translate to the NBA, which is important. So time is going to be the real teller on that trade.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sort of just rounding off on the Suns, much like all the the other teams that you sort of addressed thus far, they're gonna play young. They're gonna try and improve their record, as you mentioned. I think they're gonna be a lot more competitive. It's unfortunate Devin Booker injured his hand, so we don't know how long he's gonna be fully out for. I didn't see much of the diagnosis, but I think he's gonna miss at least the start of the season. So we'll see how they're gonna adjust with that Devin Booker in the lineup, and then when he comes back into the lineup. So definitely gonna be an interesting time for the Suns. If you're a Phoenix fan, definitely this is one of the times that you want to really be on board, because there's a lot of hope for the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the arrow is definitely trending in the right direction. I kind of wish they were willing to take a little bit more of a patient approach than what they have. I kind of feel that they're rushing a little bit too much into trying to get those wins now, and it might not pay off. I would have preferred them to keep that future first rounder, but we'll see. I do think that I know a lot of people are predicting them to take a big spike in the right direction in terms of their performance. it's just like I said earlier, it's going to be tough. Those wins in the West are going to be real premium wins. You know, so many teams have got better. I mean, you look at the West, who realistically has got much worse. You know, the Grizzlies had a poor season, but they've got Mike Conley returning. You know, drafted Jaren Jackson Jr. You know, the Lakers are going to improve. Mavericks are going to improve. I mean, you've got to expect some losses, you know, some additional losses for the Timberwolves. But it's really difficult to, you know, when you try and sort of pan out records in the West, it's really difficult to pan out where those additional wins are going to come from.
Yeah, exactly. Like we sort of mentioned before, the Western Conference is a whole nother beast compared to the Eastern Conference. But yeah, just to round off the podcast as well, like you mentioned at the top, that you sort of more focus, you know, on player development, the rookies, college game and stuff like that. Just, you know, for my listeners here, who do you think are some rookies that maybe don't get a lot of shine or don't get a lot of notice that fans should actually take some type of attention to?
So it's kind of sleeper rookies, if you like.
Yeah, I guess
people
sleeper
that have
rookies,
the skill set to break out.
Yeah, exactly. So ones like, you know, sort of what we've seen before, like the Kyle Kuzma types, where, you know, not a lot of people were sort of expecting much, but then sort of comes out of the nice polished product and definitely contributes well to the team a lot more than what people initially expected.
Well, I think it was quite a unique draft in a sense this year that, you know, it happens every year, but this year we saw a lot of potential lottery picks fall into the second round. And, you know, I say potential lottery picks a year before they were drafted. You know, Gary Trent Jr. was a 5-star recruit out of Duke. He was at one point projected as a lottery pick. You know, he got taken in the 30s. You know, Mitchell Robinson was very much the same. I feel really sorry for that kid because, you know, all the athleticism in the world, you know, another 5-star recruit, a few off-field things went wrong, you know, ended up not going to college. He got some really poor advice from the team around him. They told him to pull out the combine, really hurt his draft stock, and he went, you know, 39th or something like that off the top of my head to the Knicks. So they're definitely two guys. You know, an undrafted guy who, again, was a 5-star recruit that might, you know, I'm not expecting a superstar, but it's definitely worth just keeping an eye out for. The name is Trayvon Duval. You know, his draft stock absolutely plummeted last year, but again, at one point he was considered the number one point guard in the class. You know, the number point guard prospect ahead of, you know, guys like Trae Young. I've also got to go for my guy Jana Musa as well, Bosnian, drafted by Brooklyn Nets. He's a really unique player, 6'9" guy who has the ability to put the ball on the floor, handle the ball, decent passer, can score from 3 levels. Really weak on the defensive ends, but I think he's in a system that play the fastest pace in the league. He invites, you know, he really welcomes and invites confidence. He has that swagger, and I think that he's going to be a fun player. You know, we're not talking about NBA All-Star level or anything, but I think he's definitely a guy that, in terms of, he's a guy that can score, pass the ball, put the ball on the floor, and he's going to get a lot of mismatches being 6'9", occasionally playing the 2 and the 3 as well. So, yeah, they're 3 guys I think that, you know, definitely outside the lottery, that are definitely worth in consideration of just keeping an eye on in terms of future performance.
Cool, that's awesome to hear. You actually brought up an interesting point. I hope I'm not taking much more of your time, but you do focus sort of on college, and I don't get a lot of college sort of, I guess you get pundits, I guess you could say, but you sort of said, you know, you mentioned names like Trayvon Duval, Gary Trent Jr., and, you know, they're all teammates at Duke, and I feel like obviously there's been this sort of trend, you know, again with Duke, you know, Zion Williamson, Jay Barrett, Cam Reddish, that sort of creating these super teams within the college environment. And do you think that's a positive thing for people? Do you think, you know, that's the right way for, you know, these sort of top recruits to approach going to college? Should they go to these colleges where they can be the star, or should they go and team up? Because I feel like, you know, like I mentioned, you got Cam Reddish, Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett, that they're probably going to be top 5 picks, but then you have someone like on the team as well, Trey Jones, who was the number 1, number 2 point guard in the class, and he might sort of be overshadowed. And, you know, how do you think that sort of works out in the future for these sort of, you know, ESPN 100 type players, these McDonald's All-American players that try and team up, and it seems to maybe not backfire, but obviously not work out as it sort of intended to?
I think every single player is a unique and individual case, and I think that it's really healthy for some players to be in that high pressure, high profile environment surrounded by, some of the best of the best. And I think for others, it's not. Others need to be the star of that team. You look at a guy like Colin Sexton going to Alabama. That's a kid who needed to be the star, if you like, and got that opportunity. Each player, I think's an individual case. Some players really thrive in it. Some don't as well. Whether it's Duke, Kentucky, you got to remember that a lot of whether it's Duke, Kentucky, they pretty much have a starting five, which are all freshmen as well. So some of the expectations in how they're going to perform, especially out the gate, sometimes get a little bit out of control. It was the same thing last year when we were looking at the Duke team with, Bagley Jr., Wendell Carter Jr., Trayvon Duval, Gary Trent, etc. Everyone was saying, this team is going to walk away with the national tournament championship. But you forget, there's sides like, Gonzaga, for example, mid-major team who, they've got guys, going into this year like, Rui Hachimura and Killian Tilly, experienced guys that are potential lottery picks themselves that have now been coached in the system and coached well for 2-3 years. It does make a difference. So I think it just depends on the individual player. I think some are ready for that almost sort of, being surrounded by just elite players. Some just really struggle, like you said, not being the superstar. They're used to being the best player in their state or their region and all the hype that goes with it. That they sometimes, I think, struggle not being that guy. But I don't think there's any kind of one definitive answer. I mean, I much more prefer the kind of environment that's created in Kentucky to that of Duke. I always feel, I could be wrong here, I always feel there's a lot more pressure on these guys at Duke, and I don't think the coaching's been particularly great the last few years there. Kentucky had, for their standards, a really raw, even for their standards, a really young and raw team last year that probably didn't perform. But again, you see sides like Duke and you see sides like Kentucky play at this pace, this unique game. They're trying to fit, a lot of guys that play the same position on the floor at the same time, like we were talking about earlier with Fox, Monk and Briscoe. You had 3 guys that potentially could play point guard, but all having to be on the floor at the same time and trying to make it work. So all of that sort of takes in a bit of an element into it as well. I think it just changes from year to year on the personnel. But like I said, I don't think there's any one particular answer to it.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, that's exactly sort of how I sort of thought. I feel like the team that have success are those players that sort of stick around, maybe not so notable in the ESPN 100 rankings, or don't make the McDonald's All-American games or the Jordan games, but still a solid player. And I think Villanova sort of with Jay Wright sort of followed that sort of that model. And you mentioned Gonzaga as well. Gonzaga is one of those teams that have consistently performed within the NCAA tournament. But I think we'll end it here. Thanks, Craig, for jumping on. Again, this is Craig from Razball.com. Is there anything that you want to shout out, anywhere that the listeners can find you at?
You can find me on Twitter at Storytelling41, usually just a mismatch of, college and NBA hoop stuff and, occasional minor league baseball stuff as well, just all sport related. But yeah, check out Razball. We have weekly podcasts there, different writers that all sort of touch on different subjects there, whether it's player development, NBA, but it is fantasy related. So if you're into fantasy sports or, DFS help or anything like that, definitely worth checking us out.
Cool, no problem. Thanks for coming on, Craig.
Never a problem. Pleasure to be here.
All right, no problem. Thank you. Bye.
Not a problem. Hope it went okay for you.
Yeah, no, it was great. Definitely we'll try and, maybe just keep in contact a bit, maybe just update on how you feel about things and stuff like that. But, yeah, it was just great to get you on.
No worries, man. All right, well, you take care.
No
and I'll...
all right, you too, mate. All right, bye.